You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you. Okay, hey everybody, how you doing? This is Matt from Ivoxy Consulting, and this is Data Center Therapy, episode number 5. I am with Mr. Chris Crow, my co-host, as always. Chris, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing all right. A little away from home. I'm in my mobile office today, but otherwise quite well.
Yeah, it's a beautiful fishbowl. It definitely reflects the sound, I would say, of all things. Do you got any carpet you can hang on the walls in there?
A little bit of an echo chamber. They might frown on me ripping that up here.
I'm wondering if you could shave that beard you're cultivating and maybe hang that on the wall. Could that maybe have that effect?
Oh, it's the Northwest signature.
It's jealousy, honestly, Chris. I could probably let myself not shave or trim for I don't know how many years and probably not even approach what's going on for you over there. So it's tip my hat to you.
I have a fun story with that one. So I was recently over in the United Kingdom in London for actually a customer project, and what made me feel the most out of place culturally is I think I was the only one in that entire city that had a beard. Now, there was beards that were trimmed, just nothing that had any kind of length to it. You guys, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know that signature Northwest quasi-hipster beard.
Well, our marketing director, Dustin, is rocking one very similar. I'm looking at him right now. And so maybe I'm left out here. Maybe I should go over to the UK and feel a little bit more at home.
Yeah, really.
Well. Well, for those who might just be joining us new to the podcast, we are Ivoxy Consulting. We are a group of engineers and other people who obviously handle marketing, and we have a sales team. But our mission is to accelerate the understanding and adoption of innovative data center technologies. We are a VAR, but it's the emphasis on the VA, the value add. We're not just product slingers. We like to build solutions and really enable our customers to take that piece of kit, and do what it's meant to its fullest. It's not just throw in hardware and brush our hands and we're done with it. We like to help build solutions, enable those solutions, and empower our customers to really take advantage of pretty advanced technology that's out there right now in the industry. One way in which we're really doing that lately is via automation. Now, we've got a lot of virtualization customers. It's really how we cut our teeth and got our start is in the virtualization space. And now you've got a lot of mature customers in terms of their infrastructure, right? They might have a Cisco UCS build out. They're up to date vSphere 6.5 or maybe even 6.7 update 1 now that that's out. But now they say, okay, I've got the really cool infrastructure. Now let's take it to the next level. And it seems like scripting and automation, software-defined data center is the way to go with that. And you've been specifically focusing on this lately, Chris.
Yeah, really quite a bit with a number of customers. And so I think what I want to spend a little time walking people through is I'm going to be talking at a VMUG here. I believe it's actually next week. So a lot of this is coming from some prepared remarks from there. So Matt, we can kind of chat back and forth. But really the scope of this, because automation can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, the scope of this is really around infrastructure as a service. So and for those that aren't familiar, all that means is the ability to spin up operating system workloads inside of either a public or a private cloud. Just infrastructure components, as opposed to software as a service or platform as a service or some of those other as a service monikers that we have.
Well, Chris, would you mind then if I kind of play devil's advocate here and I like to sometimes razz you a little bit anyway, but I think I'm well suited to not take the counterpoint on automation, but kind of try to throw up challenges where people might ask, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Or why would you do this? So you can go ahead and be the proponent. I would love to diverge from that and put on my critique hat right now.
Perfect. So all right. So I guess we'll let's get started. This will be a fun one. So infrastructure as a service solutions And in this case, really what I'm talking about is cloud provisioning solutions. So let's define a little bit of what we're talking about. And I think the best way to kind of start with that is to imagine the process that it takes to get a server from request all the way to delivered to a customer in really a modern infrastructure. And for reference, think of a modern sizable infrastructure. What do those steps look like? Well, we have approvals, we have resource allocation, right? We have to manage, make sure we're not overrunning particular either private clouds or public reservations. We have network placement. We have security, firewall configurations. We have naming standards. We have OU placement. We have local security policies, ticket updates and closures. We have to update CMDB applications. We have to update ticketing systems like ServiceNow. And then we have software configuration, and some kind of handoff that needs to happen in the customer. And those are just a few things sort of off the top of my head that need to be automated through a process. And if we think about where virtualization has been up until now, it's been a very limited slice. So yes, it's been a great success. We don't have to order servers. We don't have to have multiple. We don't have to provision network ports. There's a lot of things that we've avoided by simply having virtualization. But how long does it honestly take from a customer requesting a particular virtual machine for a workload to it actually being delivered? And that can be a process. In fact, a customer I was working with recently it would be a process of about 2 weeks. And that's with using virtualization to actually clone this box. So what took all of that time? Well, we have to get to security to have approvals. How do you deal with local admin privileges on the system? Because hopefully it's not using something like a domain account, right? Hopefully it's having a randomly generated password for your local administrator account and then using domain auth with a domain local group that only has access to that particular virtual machine. All of that takes time, and it has to be created.
Yeah, so if I can interject here, Chris, it sounds like that's a laundry list for sure, but it also sounds like the work to automate that could in some cases exceed the time it takes just to do it. I mean, you said the environment is sizable, is an assumption. Is there a line, a rough delineation where you say if your environment is only this large, you're better off kind of doing it on the manual, or is automation something that even the smallest of environments can take advantage of?
No, that is a really good point. I would only try it or do it with environments that are large enough that there is actually some form of handoff between different groups. So, for instance, if you're the sort of customer that has an infrastructure department and then separate application folks, and you get requests like, I need a new SQL server for such and such a reason, that's really a good use. So a bad use case is if you are, let's say, running a few hundred virtual machines is all, and you're a one-man IT shop, and you have, or a 5 or a 10-man IT shop, then this may not be what you're after with what I'm talking about specifically. Now, I think there's still a lot of value in automation, because let's just, with your devil's advocate bit there, Matt, let's just pretend that it does take me longer to automate the process. I'm not actually as concerned about that, because what automation provides is that consistency of checkpoints the entire way through. I never miss a step. I don't mess up a naming standard. And just the very act of automating something. Think of, this is in fact a great example, one I go through all the time with customers. Think of your naming standard for your servers. What does it look like? Does it have a location code in it? Does it have the operating system in there? Does it have the application in there? And then tell me how you would teach a computer what that naming standard is. It can get really complex. And just being able to talk about that process is, I think, really helpful for a lot of customers. We can talk about naming standards and stuff more specifically, but that's a pretty salient example of what I'm talking about. So I've been stepping around the question, what's the right size? Anytime that, if I was to put a virtual machine figure, I would say that you're probably north of 500 virtual machines. Would be when I would start to look at these sorts of solutions.
And to your point, though, when you're talking, I would say that's strictly an answer about the infrastructure as a service, right? Because like you said, you touched on it, automation can be as big or as small of a process. You can have the most minor task be automated. Just because you might not have as large of an environment doesn't mean that you can't leverage scripting and automation in other smaller pieces of your environment, on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a huge fan of, and probably a topic we'll have further on, is this idea of infrastructure as code. Where, okay, my ESX server can, so think about one of your servers, an Exchange server, as an example. Is that Exchange server a virtual machine that you care about, that you upgrade, that you document? Or is the Exchange server simply expressed by, and I don't know exactly what it is, but 15 lines of PowerShell? Because I'll tell you, in my lab, my ESX servers, they're expressed by 30 lines of PowerShell. I don't care about them. And even if it takes me a little longer to automate in that way, it provides that consistency. And so the difference of what we're talking about today is really the audience. With an infrastructure as a service cloud provisioning platform, the audience is not just me as a lab administrator where I'm doing this to speed things up. The audience is my users, which tend to be server administrators, to keep things consistent. And so it goes a little further, because if we think about automation of just virtual machines, it's easy to push a button and spin up a virtual machine. But what kind of process is in there? And this is actually another great question to be thinking about. When you spin up that virtual machine, how did you know that you had enough space for it? Enough RAM, enough storage space? That's something that our mammalian brains do really well at when we just eyeball a cluster on an ESX host, but really think about what that standard is. And this is, I think, one of the largest or biggest values of going through automation POCs is it really exposes a lot of these processes.
Now, I also think you said where your customers typically server administrators. I think this kind of approach to your data center also works a step past that. Not just your SAs, but you've got teams that are new product development that are requiring labs and dev environments to be spun up on demand. They might not be part of your IT staff, but they're certainly developing code and developing product and software for their product that requires environments to be spun up, at will. And I think you touched on that, because that's part of this scope creep where, listen, are they IT department or are they not? Well, they're not, but they still need the power to provision things as if they were. So you're kind of breaking out of that traditional boundary. Yeah,
it's no longer acceptable for our customers to say something like, well, we need this set of servers to do testing on. And then for the IT department to respond, well, we'll have that back to you in a day or 2 days, or even in a lot of cases, a few hours. Think of how testing works on modern applications. It's all automated. You spin up new infrastructure, lay the code on top of it, and then run through your testing procedures. And that's what this sort of project really enables. Now, I find it's no longer acceptable for requests to come through where it takes days or hours for a particular group, developers or server administrators, when they request a server, to be waiting that long. Specifically the product that I work with the most these days is vRealize Automation, which is VMware's cloud and automation platform. There are others that we work with a bit that compete with it. We can get into some of those at later podcasts. But to be clear about what vRealize Automation does and what it does not do, vRealize Automation provisions infrastructure as a service. It has your command and control. It stops people from using more than their fair share. So think like an MSP sort of environment. And some of those governances. It does kind of have the ability to do day two actions, to be a delivery truck, that sort of thing. But what it doesn't really compete with is tools like Ansible, Puppet, and Chef, which are really configuration management systems, or even Terraform to a certain extent. And so the crux of my talk next week is really around structuring POCs and how to really make that successful. We've seen certainly a lot of variance when it comes to being successful with these automation projects. So, I guess kind of going with a few talking points to leave people with, which will be a little bit of a teaser. So I'd encourage everybody to come down to that, and maybe I'll see if I can actually get a recording. But some questions I would start by asking yourself: where are you getting your current build information from? Is it from an email? Is it from ServiceNow? Is it somebody walking over to your desk? Or are you the person that kind of decides, right? And if the answer is you do actually have build information, then this might be the right sort of thing to embark on. But you're going to want to capture that information. A lot of my customers use ServiceNow. One even actually uses paper. They drop a form on somebody's desk. They really need the automation.
Yeah, no possibility for any kind of numbers to be fudged on that, right?
Right, exactly.
Oh, I thought that 4 was a 6.
Going to add an extra 0 to the amount of RAM because everybody wants more RAM.
You sound like a DBA.
Yeah. Of course. Well, and by the way, even your governance changes in that case because we don't argue with DBAs about how much RAM they're going to use. I don't care. They're simply going to pay for it. If you want servers that have 768, I am just a service. It would be like Amazon saying, no, you're ordering too big of a box. Now, if you order too big of a box, I kind of celebrate because then I'm bringing in more income. Obviously, within the same company, not quite the same. But it is an important point that putting in an automation product answers questions more around guarantees instead of efficiency. If you had an IT infrastructure that was running a private cloud and had complete control over it, I have zero doubt that they are going to be more efficient and need less servers than if I was to put in an automation system. Because the automation system, instead of looking at utilization, says this is what I'm guaranteeing. As such, you're going to see things like, hey, VRA thick provisions disks by default. It does not overcommit RAM. It has fixed CPU over subscription ratios. So a lot of that is the thought that goes into these products. So that's kind of the first thing. Where are you getting your information? The second is, what is going to be your clear defined win within that process? So you start and you get that form on your desk. You get the ServiceNow ticket. You get the email. There's going to be a lot of variance. You will drive yourself crazy trying to automate every one of the permutations that you're going to have. Think through your application stack. So instead, pick a clear defined win that you can use as a proof of concept. Most recent project I did, that was a generic Windows server and a generic Linux server within certain data centers within certain networks. And then we go back to our list of all of the things that we documented to get a server from point A to point B. Or excuse me, from point A to the or starting point to the finish line. And start automating. And this is really where I find that, to have a slight plug for a VAR, where a consultancy can help out quite a bit, because we can answer questions like, how feasible or is what you're trying to do? Is this, because I often make the joke, and this is kind of a half IT, half dad joke, so it's really not funny. But the good and the bad thing about vRealize Automation is it can do anything, right? On the one hand, I can automate everything for you, but on the other hand, I can do anything. So the craziest ideas that a customer or that a consultant or that a user can come up with, I can absolutely do. But is it going to be delicate and take 40 hours or 160 hours for me to pull off things like, I don't really like the Amazon VPC labels. Can we hack something and change that? Well, sure, but should you? But should you?
Well, and is VRA something, Chris, where, like you said, it's so powerful it can do anything? Is it something that you better come with requirements, or is it something where you install VRA and you have cookie cutter common build workflows? Are those presented to you, or is it a canvas right off the bat?
It is a canvas right off the bat. It is one of the most intimidating things to look at, because
Right. So you should have those conversations ahead of time with what are we actually trying to accomplish? Where are we trying to build in standards and automation workflows before you even dive into getting into the product?
Absolutely. To even see if it's something that's feasible, because staring at a blank canvas, we can sometimes get some funny ideas in our head. So that's some of the starting places that we go to with an automation project.
So you're going to be at UserCon in Portland in a week from tomorrow, looks like.
Sounds right, the 25th.
Well, I guess tomorrow, as far as the podcast goes, it's relative. So it looks October 25th on Wednesday, yes.
It may have already happened by the time this is published. So with any luck, I'll be able to have a video.
Oh, no, our market, Dustin is crossing it. No, don't you dare, Chris. He's going to have it out. So we have it on the record.
I'm getting notes from the sound booth. I'm waiting for him to get little signs to say, stop.
Well, that would be a feat in itself, getting all three of us physically together for one of these episodes one day.
That would be a lot of fun. That might be the time we need to go to a video podcast. Well, man, you know what? On second thought, I have a face for radio. So
I don't agree, Chris. Well, that's just a little taste of what you're going to be diving into there at VMUG. Do you have anything else you want to wrap up on the topic before we kind of move on?
I don't think so. I think the best you can do for people that want to look at automation projects is see what's out there. Drop us a line. I'm happy to compare and contrast products. Something that I think a lot of people find very helpful is to go through workshops on this. We actually spend, as part of these projects, time talking about the product, talking about the ecosystem, spending time installing it, and then we spend a couple of days just learning to ask the right questions about how to automate this stuff, which is what makes it kind of hard to condense here, because even talking about naming conventions, I don't do that until the workshop to start bringing some of these concepts up, because I really find it something that we have to change our thinking a little bit. Computers are incredibly dumb. They do exactly what we tell them to, and so we have to be very, very careful what we tell them to. My last thing I'll say on that naming convention is think, and a bit of a taste for the workshops that we do. Think for a moment with that naming standard. You have your location, you have your application, and then you usually have a number. So how many permutations of location and application do you have? The last customer I talked to had 150, and for each of those permutations of location and application, he was resetting the number. Now, for those that have played with Excel, how do you teach a computer to do that? It's almost impossible. Essentially, you would have to have the system start looking up in a spreadsheet to see what names are taken or to find the last one that's used. Or you program in 150 different naming prefixes for the system to keep track of, because one way or the other, what you've kept track of in your head with that spreadsheet is 150 different variable counters for names that are going through. That's not a trivial thing for a computer to do, and that's the sort of thing that we deal with quite a bit. That customer that had 150 naming conventions changed their entire standard as part of this. They went to a single character, whether it was Windows or Unix, and then a 6-digit number that counters, not even a location code. Why? Stuff may move. We may move a Windows virtual machine from one data center to another. So why have the location code? I almost want to force people to have to look things up.
Yeah, that's the contrarian in you, I think. But that's an argument for another day. One thing you said is if computers are incredibly dumb, they do exactly what you tell them. You must never have used Siri, because I have completely contradictory evidence that the computer does exactly what I tell it to. Almost every time I use Siri.
So, I think that's the problem with anything analog. Human voice, language, all of that, but I suppose that gets into a whole other philosophical topic. But you do have a good point there.
It feels like voice recognition has been 95% of the way there for decades. I remember Dragon Naturally Speaking. It just feels that way. Anyway, neither here nor there. Thank you, Chris, for filling us in on that. I'm not going to be able to make your talk, but if you can get it recorded, I would really love that, actually, if you could somehow make that available, and we could even possibly put it into a further podcast for consumption if we get a decent... Yeah. If, you're not in the fishbowl, if you get a microphone on you.
We'll find out. Yeah, I'll do my best.
Have you, I would like to move on to our little bit segment. I've never seen that before. Do you have any? I have one thing. It's not anything crazy, but do you have anything that's come to mind over the last few weeks?
Not particularly. I mean, I learned what rolling a fiber cable is. That apparently you can always reverse fiber connections. But I've been spending the last couple of weeks in a data center or a couple of data centers in London. So if you thought I was boring before, it's gotten even worse now. So we should go with yours.
Well, okay, yeah, it's nothing too exciting, but it's definitely on a road well worn with our NetApp expertise. Right, NetApp is one of our largest vendors. We've been selling their products for a decade plus, and are very well versed in seeing most things that are out there. I had a customer who had a 4-node cluster. They're running the FAS 8020 platform on all 4 nodes, and we were prepping to upgrade. ONTAP, they were already running 9.3. We were looking to push to 9.4. Not a major upgrade, not a major project. Pretty basic. One of the pre-checks that the upgrade process runs is are any of the nodes running above 50% CPU? The idea behind that is if any of them are above 50%, it will be taking the I/O and disk load from its partner node during the upgrade phase while the partner node upgrades. And if both of those nodes are currently running at over 50%, 50 plus 50 is 100. All of a sudden, its CPU is overwhelmed. So it makes sure that things aren't too busy ahead of time. Well, we got the alert that one of our nodes was running above 50%. And, if one's running 55% and the other's running 2%, who cares? But, it's something you want to take a look at. So I dropped into the node that it was telling me about, and I look and, whoa, that CPU is pegged at 100%. Consequently, the disk was sitting there almost idle. So I said, well, this could be a number of things. This could be single instance storage, right? It could be dedupe. It could be a garbage collection. It could be anything, really. So I start diving in and throwing up some debug commands, and it's telling me the host OS process of the NetApp is taking all of the CPU cycles. And we're talking, I think this was a hex core or processor. Anyway, all of the CPUs were at 100% on this head. Digging in, opening up a support case, but while we're waiting to get escalated, let's try our own thing. We went into the customer's auto support account, went back 2 months. That CPU for the last 2 months at least was at 100%.
Oh, no.
That and the customer was reporting about sometimes we'd have dropouts, this and that, and well, that certainly could be an issue if I/O hits that head. So can you guess while we were waiting for NetApp what we ended up taking a swing at?
The Windows admin in me wants to say you rebooted it right now. I have no idea.
Could the old NetApp version of Control-Alt-Delete? Yeah, we actually there was one data aggregate on that controller, so we did an aggregate relocation to its partner node. It's iSCSI only, so there was no lift migration, right? Okay. We just basically disabled storage failover on that pair and rebooted the node. And we kind of were crossing our fingers that everything came back okay, and sure enough, it was fine. And we watched it for about 20-25 minutes. It was fine. We then relocated the aggregate, re-enabled storage failover. Everything was fine, and that was it. But it was for 2+ months was running at 100%.
I feel like you completely ruined my joke there because it was supposed to be, it's funny you rebooted the box. I always hate it when that happens because, and I'm sure you share this, it's like, well, yeah, we fixed the problem, but we don't know what it was. Was that a race condition inside of the host process? I mean, but of course, how many times have we had to do that in our career? But with a storage array, it just goes to show you these are all just operating systems.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. I don't love the idea of upgrading to a different OS version without sorting out what exactly was causing that. Because unless NetApp turns on and says, yes, you hit this bug and it's fixed in this version of software, I feel fine about it. But even though the reboot fixed it, upgrading while you might be papering over something that you don't want to paper over. And ultimately, it was a considered and measured decision, and we feel fine about going forward with that. But it always, has that in the back of your head. If you don't really truly know the root cause, any kind of change that's not towards completely identifying what happened, it makes me itch as a intellectual in terms of the IT industry, right? I like to be curious, and so hopefully it won't come back. But that's one of those things that I would like to see auto support, or what's it called now, Active IQ on the NetApp side. I would love to see that be proactively thrown at. Like if a disk fails, a new disk shows up in the mail automatically.
Yeah.
I would like to see something like that also be called out. Now, you can run your own analytics, and you should be, right?
Yeah.
But it would also be neat if on the back end it threw an alert
And a
as
lot
well.
of that is configurable inside of ActiveIQ, right? Where you can actually tell it, I want to receive notifications about all of these things. But I don't know of a CPU specific one. I've always taken care of that with on command unified manager or something, or I guess performance
right,
manager
exactly.
at this point. We got to
Right.
up with a naming game,
Right.
To say, hey, if you're above 75%, and then send an alert. So I guess a shameless plug for monitoring.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. So part of me wants to say, I'd love to go into work for a certain period of time and not have to say I've never seen that before. Everything I run into, I want to have seen it 3 times up to that point in my career.
Yeah.
But I, at the same time, would I be basically professionally dead at that point if that was the case? I mean, if you're not learning, if you're not seeing new stuff, you're moving backwards. I think probably, right?
That is a good point. But I don't know. I could. At certain points, I like to embrace the boring, but
right. So I'm kind of on the fence here, but that one thankfully wasn't too bad. The little voice in the back of my head is, all you want to do is upgrade ONTAP, and here we are. Here we go. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad. If you are not already subscribed to the Data Center Therapy podcast, check us out. We're on iTunes. We're on Google Play, Overcast, or Stitcher. If you want to talk about what you've heard here today, if you have questions, if you want to learn more, if you want to talk about automation, anything really, shoot us an email. Either hit us at ivoxy.com, that's ivoxy.com, or reach out to us at podcast, singular, podcast at ivoxy.com is our email address if you have any questions. And might even bring up the question on a future podcast, or at the very least, we'll get back to you. Chris, thank you very much for kind of enlightening us a little bit about automation. It seems like it's a fairly deep topic. I think we're going to be talking about it a bit more on future episodes and drilling down to the more specific aspects of it. But again, looking forward. Hopefully your talk goes well next week. And you have anything to add before we wrap?
Nope. I think we're set. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you next time.